Hey folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and I am super excited about today's episode because we're going to be covering one of the unicorns of the offset world, and that is this Fender Japan J Mascis Signature Jazzmaster. Boy, oh boy, I am so glad to have one of these in the shop again after so long. It's been a while. And these, as I said just before, are quite a rarity. Even if you go look on Reverb or eBay, or even some of the shop listings from the Japanese websites, this one is hard to find, and if you do find it, expect to have to pay a pretty penny because the asking prices for these, as you will find, start around $2,700. Now, I'm not sure exactly how many of these they made back in 2008 or 2009 when Fender Japan first released this signature model, but I can only assume it wasn't that many. It had to have been in limited quantities because, again, you really do not find these on the used market very often. Now, let's just go over a couple of the specs of this Fender Japan J Mascis Signature Jazzmaster. Unlike most of the Fender Japan guitars from the 90s and the 2000s, this one actually features a really gorgeous purple sparkle nitro finish with a matching headstock. It is just a really striking look overall. The nitro finish on here is fairly thick, probably comparable to those that you would have found on the American Vintage 62 series. This featured also an alder body as well as a medium C profile satin nitro finished neck. This has a rosewood fretboard with a 1.65-inch nut width, as well as a 7¼ radius with jumbo frets. Now, as far as electronics go, these did feature the same electronics that Fender Japan was putting in their standard JM66, or just their standard Fender Japan Jazzmasters at the time. And that is to say that the pickups in this, unfortunately, are not proper Jazzmaster pickups. And actually, one of the reasons why we were inspired to install different pickups in this one for my client that brought this to me, because these have the pickups that were more like Strat pickups in Jazzmaster clothing. As compared to true Jazzmaster pickups, the constructions of these had a tall and narrow coil, very akin to that of a Strat, but they were sandwiched between Jazzmaster bobbins. The output on them was middle of the road, just around 7K or so, but they were super bright, especially when paired with the 1 meg pots that come standard in the lead circuit here. The rest of the circuit here is standard Jazzmaster spec with your 2 1 meg pots in the lead circuit, your 3-way toggle switch, as well as your rhythm circuit with the 1 meg and 50K mini pots. Now, similar to the Squier J Mascis Jazzmaster, which was heavily inspired by or based on this model, this one does feature an Adjust-O-Matic or Tune-O-Matic bridge, a Nashville style one, as you can see, but it is ever so slightly offset at an angle here, likely for intonation purposes. And lastly, this did feature a bone nut as well as proper Goto SD91 vintage style tuners. As was standard with all Fender Japan Jazzmasters and Jaguars at the time, this did also feature the Japanese tremolo or vibrato unit, which unfortunately does leave a bit to be desired. They have vastly improved, I feel like, in recent times, but without extra attention to detail, these can feel, unfortunately, quite janky and noisy. You get clicking sounds, and I did things during the servicing process here to address those. Now, I did mention before that this model does have a medium C profile, and when I measured with my calipers, that left us with 0.85 inches at the first fret and 0.92 inches at the 12th. So not overly chunky as you move up the neck. Actually, that is quite slim, especially by modern Jazzmaster standards, which a lot of them that have come out since the 2010s have been quite full as you go up the neck. Overall, that makes for a really, really comfortable neck profile, not overly thin like some will find on some of the 90s and earlier 2000s models. And paired with the jumbo frets on this, which was one of the only models, if not the only Fender Japan Jazzmaster model that came out around this time that does feature those frets, you do not need to press down as hard when you are fretting as compared to ones with vintage frets installed. And overall, this is just a super comfortable and premium feeling Jazzmaster. Now, I did find some quirks with this. This had come to me in a pretty serious state of disrepair. My client had said that it smelled really bad. He got this actually for fairly cheap, definitely a lot cheaper than the $2,800 that people are asking for it. So he wanted to put in the work to make it as good as it can possibly be. Yeah, he said it smelled really bad, like someone might have like spilled beer or something inside of the cavities. And so I needed to completely rewire this thing. Now, typically when I'm upgrading electronics, I will go for using, CTS AVRI spec mini pots in the rhythm circuit, but the anodized aluminum pickguard on here is so thin that when I tried to mount an American mounting bracket for those rhythm circuit pots here, the screws actually would not hold on and ended up being really, really loose. Even when I tried to put little washers in between, it did not hold with that American bracket. So that is something that I experienced on this particular model that I haven't experienced with other Fender Japan Jazzmasters, which usually have a significantly thicker plastic pick guard. So unfortunately, the solution was to retain the original bracket and just put in brand new alpha mini pots, which are good mini pots regardless of the fact we just weren't able to do the full American spec conversion on this guy. Now, I've gone on record time and time again to say that the Tune-o-matic bridge is probably my least favorite bridge to put on a Jazzmaster or a Jaguar, and that is down to the fact that the saddles here, the saddles have a slot that is sharp and V-shaped. They effectively are like a knife edge for your string. And when you consider the fact that when you use the vibrato, especially if you're a heavy vibrato user, you're basically sawing the string over that knife edge. That and the fact that this is a Nashville style Tune-o-matic that has the retainer wire, these saddles would literally not stay in place even though we have 11 gauge strings on here. I needed to use Loctite Purple 222 to keep those in place and to keep that retainer wire from rattling. And now it just feels super solid, not having any of those issues that we had before. Also, as I had mentioned before, and this is something that I have to do with a lot of these 90s to 2000s Fender Japan Jazzmasters, the tremolo unit just doesn't feel as good and as smooth as one of the American vintage units. And so to address the clicking sounds that I was getting, especially from the arm. I needed to give it a bit of a kink at the end and not push it all the way through, because somehow this vibrato unit was actually knocking into the vibrato cavity. And so after that mod, as well as lubricating the end of the arm before putting it back in the collet, we have a vibrato arm that stays in place, is nice and responsive, doesn't have really any perceivable friction as you play, even if you're doing glide strumming. And on top of it, we are getting a bit more leverage because it's sitting a bit higher. And in case you don't know, that is one simple thing you can do to your janky feeling vibratos. A lot of the time, they just feel so unresponsive and kind of dead feeling, because unfortunately, the bend of the vibrato arm is just sitting a little bit too close to the top of the vibrato plate or the top of the body. You're not getting very much leverage. And even if you just bend up at that point, you're still not getting the same feel and leverage that you usually get from a more premium unit. So it's been probably a good 15, 16 years or so since this guitar was produced. So despite the fact that Fender Japan does impeccable fit and finish work, this did need some attention to the frets. They had some seriously deep divots and also a bunch of high frets across the board. This does still have a ton of fret life left, probably about 47 or 48 thousandths after the leveling, and that gives it room for you to do at least 2 or 3 more fret levels, so long as it's being done properly. Now, the other thing that this guitar unfortunately was suffering from was there was an issue with the neck pickup. I think the coil was on the verge of breaking. I was getting very, very low output on the neck pickup, especially as compared to the bridge pickup. So because I had a set of 2025 Fender Japan traditional 60s pickups, they were a good and cheap option to swap in here while retaining some of that not too vintage accurate Jazzmaster tone. Now, in case you didn't know, some people have wrongly called the ones that are coming stock in the traditional 60s series V-Mod pickups, but they aren't. They actually are a bit closer to traditional Jazzmaster pickups with regards to how tall the coil is. They might just be ever so slightly taller, maybe like 2 or 3 millimeters taller than a standard Jazzmaster pickup. And the coil windings themselves, while more significant than the pickups that came stock in this, are still not quite as wide and filling the majority of the bobbins the way that traditional vintage accurate Jazzmaster pickups do. So I've actually got one of the original pickups here, and you can see just how tall and wide that space between the bobbins is, and also how narrow that coil is. It isn't quite as tall as most Strat pickups, but it is pretty close. And on a traditional Jazzmaster pickup, you would see that coil wire filling in the majority of that space between the bobbins, and also these bobbins would be a lot closer together. So overall, just a thinner pickup than this one here. Now, once all of these issues were addressed, this is just a phenomenal feeling Jazzmaster. Even when compared to other Jazzmasters produced by Fender Japan at the time, you can just feel the extra quality that went into this. The satin finish nitro neck feels better to my hands than the high gloss finish on a lot of those Fender Japan guitars that were coming out at the time. I really, really love this neck profile. It still is fairly thin as you go up the neck, as I mentioned before, And though I'm not usually a fan of jumbo frets, fretting and chording and doing leads on this just feels really, really good. Additionally, with the fixes that I had done to the Tune-O-Matic bridge to solve all of the rattling and buzzing that was coming from that bridge, as well as the janky feeling that I was getting from the vibrato as it had come to me stock, it just feels so much better, so much more responsive, so much more stable, and does not showcase any of those issues that we were having before. Now, with all of that said, and the fact that you potentially may run into a lot of these similar issues if you were to buy one on the used market, do I think this guitar is worth shelling out $2,700 plus on? I do think that it is a gorgeous and stunning looking guitar. That deep purple sparkle finish is just so striking to look at, and no doubt this is a bit of a collector's item because, as we had mentioned from the top, these weren't produced in high volumes, so they are still quite rare to find on the used market. So if you're a J Mascis fan and you like these specs, and you like the overall feel of a guitar like this, then yeah, if you have the $2,700 plus, then I definitely could see you, retaining the value of this guitar if you had to sell it in the future. That said, it is a hard sell for me personally outside of the aesthetics and the feel of the husk here, because you do have to keep in mind that, a lot of the things that are issues here, if you're not willing to or have the know-how to address them yourself, is going to cost additional money. If you actually want a Jazzmaster that sounds like a Jazzmaster, for example, the stock pickups definitely do not sound like a proper Jazzmaster. The electronics leave a bit to be desired, and you can expect to pay at least $100 to $200 to upgrade the wiring harness. If you give it a bit of attention to detail, the bridge that's on here is perfectly fine. But if you are a heavy player or a heavy vibrato user, I definitely could see string breakage being an issue here. And I definitely still would suggest, despite the fact that I was able to fix this, I would suggest an American Vintage unit or American Vintage reissue unit to replace this vibrato, because those just overall feel so much more responsive and premium and stable of a unit, and the additional mass too of the American Vintage reissue unit does end up giving this Jazzmaster or Jazzmasters in general a bit more sustain. Now, all of those other issues aside, the nitro finish here is really, really nicely done, and over time it has started to kind of sink. You're not going to be able to see it, but kind of sink into the grain of the wood underneath. It is a proper nitro finish, because I do see, and I'm not going to be able to capture this on camera, but I do see a bit of weather checking at the top here. If you want to upgrade electronics on this thing, you probably are going to want to replace the anodized gold guard here with one that is thicker, so that you're not running into the same issues that I was, for example, with fitting an American spec rhythm circuit bracket. And aside from that, yeah, I'm super pleased with this guitar. I would be happy to own this guitar if someone had gifted it to me. I think it's a unique offering, especially from Fender Japan at that time. And for folks who like to play with a bit of a lighter touch and maybe don't get on with, tiny vintage size frets, I could see the combination of the 7 1/4 radius plus jumbo frets here being very alluring and enticing for those kinds of players. Now, the last thing, and I know folks are going to have this question, how does this compare to the Squier J Mascis Jazzmaster? And I would say, no doubt, this is an overall just a much more premium and high quality affair. That said, this is also, 5 times plus the price of a Squier. More recent iterations of the Squier J Mascis Jazzmaster do feature more proper Jazzmaster pickups as compared to the more P90-like pickups that they came with for the majority of the time that they were produced. But this one, as I had mentioned before, also didn't have proper Jazzmaster pickups, so that is one thing to consider. With regards to the hardware and the fit and finish overall, I would say that the Fender Japan one, I mean, I've gone on record to say that Fender Japan, time and time again, is just the reigning king of quality and attention to detail. And if this had been, brand new from the factory, I would not have had to do a lot of the work that I had to do on this guitar. Some other differences versus the Squier, I would say that this neck here is definitely slimmer than the Squier neck. The back of the neck here, because it's nitro, has actually gotten a bit glossy over the past 15 plus years. It doesn't feel as thick as the other Fender Japan poly finish necks. And overall, I'd say I prefer this neck to the very satin finished neck on the Squier ones. And the one thing that I definitely like much better on this is the fact that the vibrato unit is in the vintage location. I do feel that the moved up location on the Squier one makes the likelihood of breaking strings that much greater, because it's a pretty severe break angle behind the bridge. And so you can imagine, especially with heavy vibrato use, that there's even more friction happening between these strings and the kind of V-shaped knife edge of the tune-o-matic saddles. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you what your budget is. But if you really, really love the Squier J Mascis Jazzmaster and want a super high quality premium version of it and have $2,700 plus, then yeah, this one is the ticket. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all found it enjoyable as well as informative, especially if you've had your eyes on one of these Fender Japan J Mascis Signature Jazzmasters for a while. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you own this guitar? Have you played it? What do you think of it as compared to other Jazzmasters that you have played? I definitely read and respond to as many comments as possible. And so I am really, really curious to hear your thoughts and personal experiences. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.